The chain snapped tight with a metallic clank, and my boat rocked hard against the pilings like it knew something was wrong before I did. A tow truck was actually hooked to my boat, in my backyard, on my private dock. And Marla Kensington, the HOA president, stood there in pearls with her clipboard like a queen watching an execution, smiling, while she said, "You had your chance, Ethan. Now we do it my way." For a second I couldn't breathe. Not because I was scared of her, but because my brain refused to accept how insane this was. Seabreeze Harbor was supposed to be peaceful palm trees, clean sidewalks, neighbors who waved like they were in a retirement commercial. I moved here for the water, for quiet mornings and late afternoon runs out on the bay. I'm not a guy who looks for fights. I'm Ethan Brooks, mid-30s mechanical engineer, the kind of person who reads contracts and keeps receipts. I bought a waterfront house because I wanted a dock. I wanted my boat where I could see it, touch it, take it out whenever life got loud. And that's exactly why Marla decided it was a problem. The first time she ever spoke to me, she didn't say welcome. She said, "That's quite a boat," like it was a suspicious object, not the reason I paid a small fortune for this property. She stood on my porch with her perfect hair, her perfect smile, her perfect little clipboard, like she'd been born holding it, and she angled her head toward the back of my house. "We have guidelines," she said, "about visual clutter." I blinked at her. "Visual clutter?" I repeated. "It's a boat, on a dock. From the street," she said, "it's noticeable." I almost laughed. "From the street you can't see my dock unless you're leaning over someone's fence," I said. "And if you're doing that, you're trespassing." Her smile got tighter. "We're a community," she said. "We all make sacrifices to maintain property values. That's the HOA anthem, right? Property values. Community. Sacrifice. It's always those words like a spell they cast to justify whatever they want." I kept it polite. I told her the dock was private, the boat was legally stored, and nothing in the bylaws said otherwise. Marla didn't argue. She did something worse. She took out her phone and snapped a picture right in front of me like she was photographing a crime scene. "Just making you aware," she said, sweet as syrup. "Have a blessed day." 2 days later I got my first violation notice zip-tied to my mailbox. Not taped, not placed inside. Zip-tied like she wanted to make sure it stayed there long enough for every neighbor to see. "Oversized marine equipment," it said, "visible from neighboring lots." Oversized. Like I had a battleship. It demanded immediate corrective action and threatened fines. I stood in my driveway staring at it, coffee cooling in my hand, feeling that first little crack in my sense of safety. Because when someone can slap a punishment on your property for something you own, the place stops feeling like home. I emailed the HOA and asked for the exact rule I was violating. I attached my deed. I attached my survey. I asked nicely for clarity. The response came from a guy named Chase Dalton, head of compliance. His email was short, bolded, in all the wrong places, dripping with that borrowed authority HOA people love. "You are required to comply with all directives issued by the board and its appointed committees. Failure to comply will result in escalating enforcement action. No clause, no explanation. Just do what we tell you." That's when I realized this wasn't really about rules. It was about control. And Marla wasn't going to stop at a warning. She was going to push until she heard something break my patience, my finances, my pride, my life. The tow attempt happened on a morning that started normal. I was barefoot in my kitchen, half awake, making coffee, when I heard something outside that didn't belong. A reverse beep. Beep, beep, beep. Then the rattle of chains. I walked out back and saw a tow truck angled into the narrow service lane behind the waterfront homes, backing toward my dock like it had done this before. The driver wore a neon vest and a cap pulled low, and he avoided looking at me like eye contact might turn him into a witness. And there was Marla. Of course there was. Standing on the edge of my property with her clipboard tucked against her chest like a badge. Chase was beside her, arms crossed, smirking. "Morning, Ethan," Marla said, like we were chatting over fence paint colors. "You've left us no choice." I stared at her. No choice to do what. Marla lifted a packet of papers. "You've ignored multiple warnings," she said. "Your vessel remains non-compliant. We are enforcing removal." "Removal," I repeated, my voice going sharp. "That's theft." Chase clicked his tongue. "It's enforcement," he said. "You signed the HOA agreement." "I signed an agreement about lawn height and trash cans," I snapped. "Not an agreement for you to steal my boat off my private dock." The tow driver started walking toward the dock with a hook and chain. I stepped right in his path. "Stop," I said. "Don't touch it." He hesitated, finally glancing up at me with nervous eyes. "Ma'am said it's authorized," he muttered. I pointed at Marla without taking my eyes off him. "Ma'am is not the law," I said. Marla's smile turned cold. "Hook it," she said. And that was the moment my disbelief turned into a sick, hot rage. I pulled out my phone and dialed Harbor Patrol. Because Waterfront isn't just suburban HOA nonsense. There are state rules. There are navigation laws. There are actual authorities who don't care about Marla's feelings. When the dispatcher answered, I forced my voice calm, even though my hands were shaking. "Someone is attempting to tow my boat from my private dock," I said. "I need an officer." Marla scoffed like I'd called my mom to tattle. "This is an HOA matter," she snapped. I looked right at her. "It's a theft matter," I said. The tow driver shifted his weight like he could feel the word theft in his bones. A few minutes later, a Harbor Patrol boat slid along the seawall, and an officer climbed up with that no-drama posture cops have when they've seen every kind of stupidity. Officer Mark Hayes introduced himself, looked at the tow rig, looked at Marla's paperwork, looked at my dock and said, "All right. Who called I did?" I said. Marla jumped in before I could finish. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she said, voice dripping with fake relief. "This resident is refusing compliance. The HOA has authorized removal of his vessel due to repeated violations." Officer Hayes didn't even flinch. "Ma'am," he said, "before we get into whatever that is, whose property are we on?" "It's common area access," Marla said instantly, like she'd memorized that phrase. I felt my jaw tighten. "No, it isn't," I said. "This dock is deeded with my lot." I went inside, grabbed my folder because, yes, I had a folder, and came back with my deed and survey like I was walking into court. Officer Hayes read them carefully. You could see the moment his patience ran out, not with me, but with her. "This is private property," he said, "and the dock is part of the lot." Marla's smile trembled. "But the HOA," she started. Officer Hayes cut her off. "The HOA does not get to authorize the removal of someone's private boat from a private dock," he said. "Not like this." He looked at the tow driver. "Unhook it," he said. The driver didn't ask questions. He started unfastening the chain like his life depended on it, because it probably did. Marla's voice climbed an octave. "Officer, you don't understand the community standards," she said. "This vessel is a nuisance." "Officer." Hayes turned his head slowly like he was deciding how polite to be. "Ma'am," he said, "if you attempt to take someone's property again, you're going to be explaining it to someone a lot less patient than me." The tow driver backed away. The boat settled, still rocking like it was catching its breath. Marla stood there, lips pressed tight, eyes burning holes into my face. Chase leaned in and whispered something to her. Then she looked at me and said, soft and venomous, "This isn't over." And I believed her. The next day, the retaliation started. Another notice appeared on my mailbox, zip-tied again like a taunt. This one looked more official, more dramatic. Final warning. It said in bold. Under it was a line that made my skin crawl, issued by the Special Session Enforcement Committee. The problem, I'd been to HOA meetings. I knew the board. There was no Special Session Enforcement Committee. That was Marla and Chase inventing authority out of thin air, like they could just name something and make it real. I went inside and pulled up the HOA portal. I downloaded the last months of meeting minutes, and the deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Missing votes, no quorum listed, actions approved without any recorded discussion, timestamps that didn't match the meeting dates, It felt like reading a lie someone didn't bother to proofread. I printed everything. I highlighted pages. I built a little stack of evidence on my dining table and stared at it like it might bite me. That's when the doubt crept in. Not doubt about the facts, those were clear, but doubt about myself. Because fighting an HOA is like arguing with a wall that can charge you money for speaking. I started waking up with that tight chest, feeling like I was already late for something. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected another threat. I'd look out my front window and see Chase walking the sidewalk with his phone raised, documenting things that weren't his business. He'd point the camera toward my house and pretend he was filming the sky. Once I stepped outside and asked him, "Are you taking pictures of my property?" He smiled like a kid caught stealing. "Anything visible from the street is fair game," he said. "Public record." "That's not how public record works," I said. "It is when the HOA is responsible for compliance," he replied like he'd rehearsed it. Then he walked away, still filming like I was the criminal. A week later I got a letter from an HOA attorney, Tyler Reed. Official letterhead. Formal language. Threatening fines per day and legal action. It was the kind of letter meant to scare you into obedience. The kind of letter that assumes you don't know anything and won't ask questions. So I called the number. Tyler answered like he was already annoyed. I kept my voice calm. "Hi," I said. "This is Ethan Brooks. You sent me a letter about my boat." There was a pause. "Yes," he said. "You are in violation." "What clause am I violating?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. "Section 8, he said slowly. "Aesthetic standards. Section 8 covers fences and exterior paint," I said. "Not private docks." Silence. Then, "The board has discretion." "The board does not have discretion to steal property," I said. I could hear him exhale like he wanted me to shut up. "Mr. Brooks, he said it would be in your best interest to comply." "My best interest," I said, "is not being bullied into surrendering my rights." I hung up and sat there, heart pounding, staring at my own hands. Because I wasn't just mad anymore. I was tired. And tired is dangerous. Tired makes you consider giving up just to stop the noise. One night, after another email, another warning, another committee directive, I stood in my backyard looking at my boat in the dark. The water was black and calm. The dock lights made a soft glow on the surface, and I thought maybe I should sell it. Maybe I should just move. Maybe I made a mistake buying here. Maybe this is what it means to live in an HOA. You don't really own anything. You just rent peace from people like Marla. I hated myself for thinking it. I felt weak, like I'd let some woman with pearls and a clipboard crawl into my head and rearrange the furniture. I remember whispering out loud, "Am I the problem?" And that was the scariest part, because for a second I almost believed it. The next HOA meeting was on a Tuesday night, and I almost didn't go. I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the community center like it was a courtroom where I'd already been found guilty. But then I thought about that toe chain snapping. I thought about Marla smiling while she tried to take something I worked for. And I realized if I stayed silent, she'd do it again. Not just to me, to anyone she didn't like. So I walked in. The room smelled like coffee and air freshener, folding chairs, fluorescent lighting. Marla sat at the front table like she was hosting a talk show. Chase sat near her laptop, open smirk, loaded and ready. I waited for the public comment portion. When they called my name, I stood up with my stack of printed papers in my hands. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. But my voice came out steady. "My name is Ethan Brooks," I said. "I'm here because this board tried to tow my boat off my private dock." The room murmured. Marla's smile froze. "That is an inappropriate characterization," she began. I held up my hand. "I'm not finished," I said. I laid the papers on the table and pointed to the top page. "This is a notice issued by something called the Special Session Enforcement Committee," I said. "I want the board to explain what that is, when it was formed, and who voted for it." Marla's eyes flashed. "It is an internal committee appointed for compliance," she said quickly. "Great," I said. "Show me the minutes where it was approved." Chase leaned forward. "We don't have to," he started. "Yes, you do," I cut in. Because this is a legal document being used to threaten residents with fines. I flipped to another page. Here are the last 3 sets of minutes. No mention of the committee. No vote, no quorum, no notification. I turned to the room. So either the board is operating illegally, I said, or someone is fabricating authority. You could feel the tension shift. People sat up. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Marla's voice got sharp. "Mr. Brooks is attempting to derail this meeting," she snapped. I looked right at her. "No," I said quietly. "I'm attempting to stop you from weaponizing this HOA." That's when Tina Morales, one of the board members who usually stayed quiet, spoke up. "Marla," she said, cautious but firm, "did we vote on this committee?" Marla's head snapped toward her. "Tina, don't be ridiculous," she hissed. Tina didn't back down. "I'm asking," she said, "because I don't remember voting on it." Marla's smile was gone now. She looked like someone whose mask had slipped in front of an audience. "We can discuss this privately," she said through her teeth. I shook my head. "No," I said. "We discuss it now, in public, because you tried to take my boat, and if you'll do that, you'll do anything." The room buzzed. You could see neighbors exchanging looks. People who'd never challenged Marla suddenly realizing she might not be untouchable. Marla tried to move on, tried to push the agenda forward like nothing happened. But the damage was done, and that's when she got desperate. 2 nights later, I woke up to a weird feeling like something was off in the house. I checked the doors, locked. I looked out the window and saw nothing. I told myself I was paranoid, went back to bed. In the morning, I walked out to get my mail, and my mailbox was gone. Not smashed, not knocked over. Gone. The post and box had been ripped clean out of the ground like someone had yanked it with a truck. My stomach dropped. I looked around and saw footprints in the damp grass leading toward the side of my house. I ran to the back to where my security camera was mounted under the eave, and it was tilted up at the sky, like someone had grabbed it and twisted it away. My throat went dry. That wasn't HOA paperwork. That was crime. That was someone coming onto my property in the dark. My hands shook as I went inside, opened my camera system and pulled up the footage. The screen showed night vision grainy and gray. Timestamp 3:42 a.m. 2 figures slipped into frame. One held something long and dark like bolt cutters. They moved like they'd done it before, confident, efficient. One of them walked up, reached for the camera, and for a second the face turned toward the lens. The infrared light caught his features, the shape of his jaw, the way his mouth curled when he realized where the camera was. I froze the frame. I zoomed in. It was Chase Dalton, the compliance guy, the man who'd been photographing my house like it was his job. I felt my blood go cold and then hot, like my body couldn't decide whether to panic or fight. I copied the footage onto a flash drive. I called the county sheriff's office. When Deputy Renee Castillo arrived, she watched the video without blinking. Then she looked at me and said, "You know him?" "Yeah," I said, voice tight. "HOA compliance." Her expression hardened. "This isn't HOA," she said. "This is trespass and vandalism. If he was directed to do this, it's conspiracy." My heart hammered. "Directed?" I repeated. She nodded slightly. "People don't rip out mailboxes for fun," she said. "They do it to intimidate." She asked for everything: emails, notices, the fake committee paperwork, the attorney letter, the tow incident details. I handed her my stack like I'd been waiting for someone official to care. And as she flipped through it, I saw her eyebrows lift at certain parts, like even she couldn't believe the audacity. "I'm going to request additional information," she said, "and you need to stop engaging with them directly. Let us handle this." That should have made me feel relief. Instead, it made me feel something else, something heavy. Because if the sheriff was involved, it meant this had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Over the next few days, the neighborhood felt different. Quieter, but not peaceful. Like the quiet after a thunderclap when you're waiting to see what's damaged. I talked to neighbors not in a gossip way, more like, Have you seen Chase near your house? Have you noticed anything weird? And people started confessing things they'd brushed off. A broken gate latch, a camera that glitched, a missing package, a tire that mysteriously went flat after a disagreement with Marla. Little things that didn't seem connected until you put them all on the same table. Deputy Castillo came back a week later with a look on her face that told me something was happening. We pulled records, she said. We're going to be looking at HOA financials too. I blinked. Financials. She nodded. There are payments, she said, carefully listed as security and neighborhood improvement that don't make sense. My stomach tightened. I'd been fighting over a boat and a mailbox, and now we were talking about money. Real money. Embezzlement kind of money. And suddenly, Marla's desperation made sense. People like her don't just want control for fun. Sometimes they want control because it protects something worse. The next HOA meeting was supposed to be routine. Marla actually sent out a notice calling it a special community update, like she was going to spin the whole thing into a speech about unity. I didn't plan to go. Deputy Castillo told me not to engage. But I heard through a neighbor that Marla had been telling people I was harassing the board and bringing outside trouble into the community, like she was the victim. That's the Karen playbook: punch you in the face, then cry when you bleed on her shoes. So I went quietly. I sat in the back. Marla was up front, smiling too hard, voice too bright. We've had some misunderstandings, she said. And I want to reassure everyone that the board is committed to maintaining our standards and our safety. Safety. The word landed like a joke. Then the doors opened. Deputy Castillo walked in with another officer. The room went still like the air had been sucked out. Marla's smile froze. She tried to laugh. Oh, officers, is everything all right? Deputy Castillo didn't smile back. Marla Kensington, she asked. Marla lifted her chin. Yes, she said. Can I help you? Deputy Castillo held up a folder. We have probable cause related to vandalism, trespass, and conspiracy, she said. We also have ongoing investigation into HOA funds. Marla's eyes widened, just for a heartbeat. Then she recovered, voice sharpening. This is outrageous, she snapped. This is a community association matter. No, Deputy Castillo said, cutting her off clean. It's not. She turned slightly and nodded at the other officer. And right there in front of everyone, neighbors who'd sat quietly through Marla's reign for years, Marla's wrists were guided behind her back. The click of handcuffs was small, but in that silent room, it sounded like a gavel. Marla's face twisted. This is persecution, she hissed. I was protecting property values. Deputy Castillo didn't even react. Ma'am, she said, you don't get to break the law and call it standards. Marla's head snapped toward me in the back row like she could sense me, like her anger could travel through air. Her eyes locked onto mine for a second, pure hatred, pure disbelief that someone like me had dared to stand up and win. Then she looked away, jaw trembling as the officers walked her out. Chase wasn't there. He was already being handled separately. I'd find out later. But the moment Marla disappeared through those doors, something in the room changed. Not joy, not celebration. More like reality finally returning. People sat stunned. Tina Morales covered her mouth with her hand, eyes glossy like she'd been holding her breath for months and didn't even realize it until now. I didn't stand up and make a speech. I didn't need to. I just sat there feeling my heartbeat slow down for the first time in weeks. Because the truth is, I didn't want to win. I wanted to live in my house and mind my business. But people like Marla don't let you do that. They don't stop until you stop them. Later, Deputy Castillo told me more how the so-called committee paperwork was fabricated, how HOA funds had been redirected through shady security reimbursements, how Chase had been used like a weapon to intimidate residents into compliance. It was uglier than I even knew. And standing there afterward back at my dock looking at my boat rocking gently in the sunlight like nothing had ever happened, I realized something that made my throat tight. I almost gave up. I almost sold it. I almost let a bully rewrite what I owned. I almost handed over my piece because it felt easier than fighting. But the moment that tow chain clanked, the moment Marla thought she could take what was mine with a smile and a clipboard, that's when I finally understood. This wasn't about a boat. It was about boundaries. And if you don't defend them, someone like her will always step over them. Lesson: never confuse someone's loud authority with real power, especially when the law is on your side.